John continues on working with the Nettleton Court group of Moravians, meeting Nettleton Court on Aldersgate Street, just north of St. Paul's Cathedral, not too far from Charterhouse, where John had been sent as a young boy for his first experience in social climbing in London from Epworth. So the proximity of Aldersgate Street to Charterhouse, his brother having a physical breakdown that leads to a spiritual breakthrough, all of these issues building on the failure of and the fighting of the first rise of Methodism in Oxford, transferred in the search for assurance in Savannah, and the Savannah mission with the Native Americans and those failures there, leads him to the notion, as he returns back to familiar ground, that a new path needed to be found. It's the old saying, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. The insane search for working his salvation out with assurance finally broke down on May 24th. And then again, these famous passages from his journal in the Third Rise. While reading Luther's preface to the Romans, John Wesley has a breakthrough, and what surely is the only time in history that two brothers experienced spiritual breakthrough after hearing and reading the reading of Luther's commentary on Romans. John has his breakthrough in Luther's preface to the Romans. 3 days earlier, Charles had heard the preface to Galatians, the little Romans. Luther had spoke about again those great themes of by grace through faith we are saved. And then John hears these words, May 24th, 1738. In the evening I went very unwillingly to a society in Aldersgate Street where one was reading Luther's preface to the Epistle to the Romans. About 9:15, while he was describing the change which God works in the heart through faith in Christ, I felt my heart strangely warmed. I felt I did trust in Christ alone for salvation, and an assurance was given me that he had taken away my sins, even mine, and saved me from the law of sin and death. So these words are often quoted. I did trust in Christ alone, Christus pro me, that Christ was for me, and that I no longer needed to labor and live and be judged under the law of sin and death. So we often quote that on Wesley Sunday or some historical Sunday, but Wesley was buffeted by doubts thereafter, and the heart that grew so strangely warm that we celebrate was quickly grown cold. It was not long before the enemy suggested, "This cannot be faith, for where is thy joy?" And he never really had the joy. He just sensed an assurance without the joy that he thought was supposed to be experienced by the Moravians. And so he returned with a warmed heart, but he was buffeted with many temptations. And so it's important for us to think about the significance. Early on, Wesley indicated Aldersgate as an experience was a conversion. Later in his life, he saw it as more of a turn or a critical breakthrough or a synthesis, a crystallization of all the things theologically that had led to his life, but that through faith he broke through to the question Luther had asked, but that he had asked even further. How can I find a graceful God? That was Luther's question. What was answered in Aldersgate was Wesley's question of assurance. How can I find happiness and assurance? And he comes with the question of by faith alone. Now that faith alone, without the joy and assurance that quickly grew cold, led Wesley to think about traveling to Germany to talk to Count Nicholas von Zinzendorf, which he did. He traveled from London to Britain, to Germany, to Herrnhut and Halle in the summer of 1738 to talk about and to ask Count Nicholas von Zinzendorf, the head of the Halle Pietists, can I have the assurance of faith without the joy? And Zinzendorf certainly said yes. Sometimes it comes with more joy than others. This was the breakthrough, that feelings really were not the ultimate arbiter, that feelings could take different forms, but John Wesley had now synthesized and broken through from a Puritan view of Calvinism that works would purify the faith, to a more Lutheran and a Lutheran Pietist understanding that the assurance comes through faith, and then this faith would lead one to perfect that faith through works in small groups such as the Moravians and in the Holy Club. The Holy Club could not provide the works, but the works could not provide the salvation, but could perfect it, crystallize it, and lead one to restore the image of God. So it was more of a synthesis for Wesley at Aldersgate than a conversion. He looked back later in his life and really didn't put too much emphasis on Aldersgate like we do. Late in life, he looked back and said, I was probably converted, as my brothers and others said, but I moved from having the faith of a slave to the faith of a son. He was a slave to sin, and now felt that through faith sin had no more dominion over him. So that's the third rise of Methodism. It doesn't fall out quite the way you preach it on Sunday, but it gives you a little more leeway when you think about theologically that it took failures and disappointments in the first rise of Methodism in Oxford and in Savannah as a missionary, and even disagreements about theology and the feelings around faith through the various small groups. But Wesley, Charles, and John, with a strangely warmed heart, discovered that that heart could grow cold, but one needed others, both before and after great spiritual experiences, to continue on the path to wholeness and holiness in the Wesleyan way. And we're going to look at that continuing journey along the Wesleyan way and the Wesleyan revival in our next segment. Thank you.